So unless you've been living under a rock, you've heard of post-traumatic stress disorder, right? Sometimes it's called post-traumatic stress to kind of take the disordered part out of it. The concept there being that, this is people having absolutely normal reactions to totally abnormal events and circumstances, whatever the trauma might have been in their lives or happened, around them. But not a lot of us, and certainly not enough of us have heard of a thing called post-traumatic growth. Really important concept, because to me, as a therapist and also a human being and a veteran who served during wartime, it gives a little bit of hope to the big specter in the room of post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic growth is, in relative terms, it's an increase in awareness. It's an increase in acceptance. It's an increase in positive behaviors. Interesting, right? Following a traumatic event or events. Of course, there are a lot of factors that go into each of our own individual reactions to trauma. And I think over the course since 9/11 specifically, we've learned a lot more about how post-traumatic stress interacts with the brain, affects the brain, changes the brain, what it does to our lives and how it affects things, and a variety of different treatments that are really positive and very encouraging as well. And certainly those with wonderfully strong faith or spiritual resilience can still suffer the complex symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder. But I believe that spiritual resistance is a very strong component to preventing or reducing both suicide and suffering on a much broader scale. I've seen this in a lot of the work that I've done with service members, veterans, and their families in kind of an office type setting as a practicing therapist. I've seen it while overseas serving after like tsunamis and natural disasters. I've seen it within our community, and we're seeing it, almost on a daily basis as things continue to happen. And so I have a strong faith in spiritual resilience. One of the things that can, allow post-traumatic growth to occur is that spiritual resilience. So I'm excited. We have Dr. Harold Koenig joining us today to discuss that very concept, and a great set of panelists who are each subject matter experts in their own right. And I believe that between all of those five folks, and throw in Mike Wold and Heidi Lindsay, they probably know all the secrets to the universe. So let's pay attention to that as we get to that portion. Now, if we have, do we have Tanya on the line? Miss Hamilton, Director Hamilton.
Good morning,
Hey.
Mr. Winkle.
How are you, Tanya?
I'm wonderful, thank you.
That's awesome. Okay, you're always wonderful, so that's a good thing. Okay. So I'd like to introduce everybody. I think most of you who have been with us for a while know Director Hamilton. She has been an amazing advocate, really, for all Arizonans. Regardless of them being a service member or a veteran, but she, I think, does a particularly good job. That's my humble opinion, with service members, veterans, and their families. She's been with us since the beginning. She sits through long, sometimes incredibly technically, intense conversations about all sorts of things, mortality reviews and everything else. And she's always got ideas and ways of thinking about those things that are incredibly valuable and have helped move our state closer to getting to our desired number of 0 suicides. So really want to appreciate Tanya. And Tanya, would you mind just kind of telling us a little bit about the great work, doing a little introduction, and then talking a little bit about the great work that the Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family is doing?
Sure. Thank you so much, Thomas. It's a pleasure to be here this morning. Thank you for the invitation to be able to sit and listen and learn and grow from the knowledge of the panelists and the speakers that are coming on board. For those who do not know me, my name is Tanya Hamilton, and I was appointed to the director of Governor's Office of Youth, Faith, and Family in January by Governor Hobbs. I previously served as deputy. I continue to serve as our tribal liaison in the office. I've been in the office for 16 years. I've served 4 governors, and I've worked for the state of Arizona for 29. I am an Air Force brat. I was born at Luke Air Force Base. So veterans and Veterans Affairs are very near and dear to my heart. My father, who is 88 and feisty and 10 minutes away from my house, will continue to teach and educate me on all things military that I'm not learning as I'm working in the community. It's been a pleasure to be a partner with the Arizona Coalition for Military Families for over a decade. I think 2009, 2010, I can't remember, I'm getting old. But it's definitely a pleasure to support and be able to provide whatever resources that we have in our office. Our office is a grant making office, a grant writing office, and we oversee now, as of July 1st, 10 of the governor's councils and commissions. And I'm just happy to be here, offer the support, and anything that anyone needs from me, please feel free to reach out, thamilton@az.gov. And I'd love to just, chit chat, do some meet and greets. One thing, I'm sorry, I will mention, I've been working very closely with Governor Hobbs, Director of Community Engagement, Tracy Lopes, and we've been setting up some roundtables for different groups of constituencies around the state. One being faith-based organizations. That one will be coming up. We've met a couple of times with faith-based organizations. We'll continue to meet. So if you're interested possibly in being in one of those roundtables, please feel free to reach out. So that's it. Thank you. Have a wonderful morning.
That's great. Thank you so much. And that's a wonderful offer, folks. I definitely encourage you to, get that information out. And if there's a flyer or anything like that, Tanya, then we're happy to push it out to folks. But otherwise, you can contact any one of us. Tanya just put her email address in there as well. Please make sure, or Dee did, I guess. But thanks, Dee. But feel free to contact her if you're interested in those things. That is a way to provide information directly to the decision makers who are engaging in some really unique and interesting and very hopeful ways. So please take them up on that offer. All right. Next, I would like to introduce Heidi Lindsay. She has been with us for a little over a year, I think it is now, right?
Almost a year.
Almost a year. We're getting close. Okay, yeah. I'm sure it feels like 20 years for you. So Heidi is our symposium program coordinator and our Faith Network project specialist. She is also a I don't know quite how to describe this, but she's essentially, she is like a bedazzler for Zoom calls. So you'll just kind of feel a little bit better afterwards, and you'll probably look a little bit better as well after interacting with her, because you'll have a bigger smile on your face. All right. I know we have a ton of great stuff to do today, Heidi. So take it away.
Thank you, Thomas. I am Heidi Lindsay. I'm part of the Be Connected Faith Network team at Arizona Coalition for Military Families. And our team includes ACMF Director Thomas Winkle as the Faith Network co-chair with Mike Wald, who you will meet in a minute. ACMF team members Dee Person, Amanda Yanez, and Cesar Torres round out our Be Connected Faith Network team. And in our more recent Arizona Faith Network event, you may have attended the 2023 symposium that Thomas just talked about, and that was in April. And Mike Wald facilitated the faith and spirituality track, working through the importance of both spirituality and therapy on the path to healing. You've also probably seen our quarterly newsletter that was just sent out earlier this month. If you have not seen it, get in touch with me and I will send it to you. Or if you know of an upcoming event that you would like advertised in our newsletter, send it to me as well. It's Heidi@ArizonaCoalition.org. And also, we will be sending out an opportunity soon to participate in the Faith Network on a card project for service members. So watch for that email as well. And on a note on our call today, you may have noticed that everyone is muted. Please stay muted. I will too. And in a couple minutes, toward the end, we'll have a couple minutes for questions, but we will not have time to get to them all. So your questions are still very important. Please put them in the chat and we will be able to touch base with Dr. Koenig and get a lot of those still answered and send you the answers to those via email. And now I would like to introduce you to our co-chair, Mike Wald, who will introduce today's event and our speakers.
Thank you, Heidi. I want to thank all of you for attending today's faith gathering. As Heidi said, I'm the proud co-leader with Thomas of the Be Connected Faith Network. Both of us share a real interest in the connection between faith, spirituality, and serving veterans. The mission, by the way, at our Faith Network is to equip Arizona faith communities, provide effective care and support to Arizona's 500,000 or 500,000 service members and their veterans and their families. In order to do this, we reach out to the community. We try to we work with the faith communities. We give them training like we're doing today. So it's a mission that I'm very excited about, and I really appreciate you being here to learn more about how to improve your ability to serve veterans in your faith communities. I'm happy to say that our speaker today is Dr. Harold Koenig. He's a nationally recognized expert in the important role that spirituality plays in the lives of service members and veterans. I've had the good fortune to have read 2 of his 60 books. One is the one he's going to be talking about today. It's called Spiritual Readiness, and also his most recent book, which is going to be part of my library as my encyclopedia on moral injury. He has written a book on moral injury. I'll ask Heidi to put the titles of those books into the chat for you. After Dr. Koenig's presentation, we have a panel of highly experienced chaplains that reflect on Dr. Koenig's message. Also, as Heidi said, if you have questions for Dr. Koenig, please put them in the chat. We'll get to as many as we can. Thank you. We were recording this session, and you'll be able to see that. We'll be sending it out to you in a link, but also you can tell your friends to see it on our website, which I'll have Heidi put into the chat, www.connectveterans.org/faith. We'll introduce Dr. Koenig. Dr. Koenig received his undergraduate education at Stanford University, his medical school training at University of California, San Francisco, his geriatric medicine and psychiatric training at Master's of Health Science degree in clinical research from Duke University. He's a board certified in general psychiatry and formerly board certified in family medicine, geriatric medicine, and geriatric psychiatry. Dr. Koenig now serves as professor of psychiatry and associate professor of medicine at Duke University Health Systems. He's an adjunct professor at the Division of Psychiatry at the Department of Medicine at King Abdulaziz University in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, visiting professor, Department of Psychiatry at Shiraz University of Medical Services in Shiraz, Iran, was formerly adjunct professor in the School of Public Health at Ningxia Medical University in Xinhuan, People's Republic in China. Dr. Koenig has published over 600 scientific peer-reviewed academic articles. He's written more than 100 book chapters and nearly 60 books. He has given testimony before the U.S. Senate, U.S. House of Representatives on religion and public health. Dr. Koenig is a recipient of numerous national and international awards for his work. He is the editor-in-chief of the International Journey of Psychiatry and Medicine. Dr. Koenig is the lead author of the Handbook of Religion and Health, 3rd edition, 2023, with professors Tyler Vanderweel and John Raymond, who's at Harvard. They're both at Harvard. Dr. Koenig was co-leader of the 2022 Professional Development Training Course for chaplains for the U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. He has a lot of that, a lot of the training he used is in that moral injury book that he just created. He's trained over 1,000 chaplains and religious program specialists in helping the U.S. service members to develop spiritual readiness. Current work focuses on building and sustaining spiritual readiness among service members to prepare them for future combat operations. He also frequently gives training sessions in spiritual readiness, prevention of moral injury, and prevention of suicide to the U.S. Special Operations Command and the Air Force and the Ukrainian Army and their chaplains. He directs the Duke University Center for Spirituality, Theology, and Health at Durham. In 2023, Dr. Koenig, get this, was ranked 10th in the world by Research.com in category Best Social Science and Humanities Specialists, and was ranked 7th best in the U.S. He also, you can see why I'm so excited to have him here today. He also has an active clinical practice as a director of psychiatric services at Duke University. Now I give you Dr. Koenig.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Very well.
I am so excited to be here and just thrilled to see all of you here. And I'm going to now share my screen so we can get going. Okay, I believe this is the one. Yep. And so I'm now going to see if I can't make this a full screen. I don't know if I can do it or not, but I'm going to try to do it so that it takes up my whole screen. There. Now, can you see my full screen? Good, good, excellent. So we're going to talk about what it is, why it's important, and what can be done about it. So here we go. First of all, I'll talk about what is spiritual readiness, why it's important for veterans and active duty military. What about spiritual readiness and human flourishing? How is human flourishing related to war readiness? How is religious involvement connected with human flourishing and consequently with warrior readiness? Who is responsible for ensuring the spiritual readiness of both our active duty military and our veterans after the service? And what are some interventions to increase spiritual readiness for veterans and active duty military personnel? And then provide you with further resources. Now, I have about 60 or 70 slides, and I know I'm not going to be able to get through them by 1 o'clock. I'm going to try, but I'm going to go pretty fast. So I've sent Mike a copy, a PDF of all of these slides. And so you don't have to be taking pictures of the screen or desperately trying to take notes. Just get a copy of the PDF, and you know that it'll have everything on it. And you know, listen carefully so you don't forget. Okay, so here we go. What is spiritual readiness? There are various definitions of spiritual readiness depending on the branch of service. In the U.S. Army, spiritual readiness is the ability to endure and overcome times of stress, hardship, and tragedy by making meaning of life experiences. Individuals find meaning as they exercise beliefs, principles, ethics, and morals arising from religious, philosophical, and human values. Okay, so spiritual readiness can have both religious and non-religious sources and aspects of the definition. The U.S. Air Force says that spiritual readiness is the proactive practice of establishing a sense of purpose or personal priorities to develop the skill needed in times of stress, hardship, and tragedy. So it doesn't really specify anything spiritual, but it's kind of understood, intrinsically there. Now, this is the definition the U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. So the policy definition is that spiritual readiness is the capacity for mission accomplishment that results from the warfighter's connection to the transcendent. Now, that connection to the transcendent is defined by either of these four aspects: a connection to the divine, and/or participation in a community of faith, and/or sacrifice for the greater good, and/or the pursuit of meaning, purpose, value, and service. Now, that's the policy definition. So that's too long, for the Navy and stuff. So they have a street definition. Spiritual readiness is the strength of spirit that enables the warfighter to accomplish the mission with honor. With honor. Okay. So how do you measure spiritual readiness? This is the most commonly used measure of spiritual readiness out there right now, used by specifically the Navy, Marine Corps and Coast Guard, but also the Army uses it. It's the 17-item SOCOM Spiritual Fitness Scale, the SSFS. So it's made up of 3 different subscales. One is a personal connection with God, or the transcendent subscale. So there are about 7 items that are asking questions about that. There are 5 items asking about commitment to pursuing meaning, purpose, and values. And then finally, there are 5 items assessing sacrificial service and self-donation to others. And here we have the actual items on the scale. So you can kind of take a look at that. Okay, so next scale is, why is spiritual readiness important to active duty service members and veterans? Why is that true? Because of the consequences of the lack of spiritual readiness. There are consequences of not being spiritually ready. And here they are: depression, suicide, anxiety and stress-related disorders, including PTSD, anger and aggression, substance use disorders, family, marital, and relationship problems, and inner conflict over transgressing moral values. That's moral injury. So these are the consequences. It's going to be tough to be spiritually ready, to be able to accomplish the mission with honor if you've got any of these. So let's take a look at each of these. So depression, actually quite common in the military. 1 out of every 2 active duty military has a significant depression. And among veterans, it's considerably higher. So here are the symptoms. A mnemonic to help you remember is SIG-E CAPS. Sadness, loss of interest, guilt, loss of energy, difficulty concentrating, loss or excessive appetite, being agitated or kind of slowed up, having trouble sleeping or sleeping too much, and having any suicidal thoughts. Okay. What's the next one is suicide, which is, one of the depression is the strongest predictor of suicide. There's no question about it. When people lose hope, they lose meaning and purpose. The next thing that draws them in is suicide. So in 2020, suicide rates in the military and in veterans combined, the DoD was the highest on record. There were 4 times more active duty military or veterans since 9/11 that have died by suicide than have been killed in all of the wars since 9/11. That means Afghanistan, Iraq, the entire Middle East, all of the wars, and not only there, but all over the world. 4 times more deaths from suicide. Every one of the consequences of a lack of spiritual readiness mentioned here, depression, stress, inner conflict, increases suicide risk, every one of them. Trauma and stress-related disorders, anxiety, there's post-traumatic stress disorder. Do you know that 1 out of 10, every 10 active duty military, 1 out of every 10. We have how many people on the call? 71. If there were 71 active duty military, then I would suspect on the call, but I know there are a lot of veterans too, and it's even higher. We're talking about 7 people with PTSD in the last 7 days, 30 days. So 7 people on this call in the last 30 days have had significant PTSD symptoms. And those are the criteria. Are you experiencing or have witnessed a severe traumatic stressor? Are you having flashbacks or nightmares about that? Do you avoid reminders of the trauma? Do you have difficulty having positive feelings towards others? Are you easily startled? Do you feel tense or on edge? If you got any of those symptoms, then maybe you ought to, talk to somebody about whether you might have PTSD, because there are things to do about this. Believe me, you don't have to live your life with PTSD. And yet there are many, many people who live decades with this illness, destroys their life, leads to substance use disorders, leads to the street or to prison. Anger and aggression, 50% of active duty military. This is based on the big surveys by the behavioral health surveys by the group in California. I can't remember. It may come or may not. Okay. The fact is 50% had anger or aggression problems in the last 30 days, and 7% had it 5 or more times in the last 30 days. So there are various forms of, aggression and anger. One is kind of generally healthy, the healthy individual who gets angry and upset based on certain situations. You get some anger management treatment and then it goes away and you're fine. Then there's the person with antisocial personality problems dating back to childhood, typically, with problems of impulse control. So they have impulses of anger and they can't control it. They just kind of go ballistic. They can't control themselves. And then anger management training and social skills training often help, but sometimes not. Now there is then the last category here. There's the psychopath who uses psychological and physical aggression to accomplish his or her self-serving goals. Now, these are people who enjoy hurting other people. They get a thrill out of it. It gets the adrenaline flowing. They don't feel any guilt. Like I said, it causes pleasure to do these things to other people. Anger management training and social skills training do not help. Or they may help in about 10% who are kind of on the edge of the psychopathic syndrome. And we would argue that none are beyond the help that God provides through chaplains and through his own intervention in people's lives. No one is beyond the hand reach of God. But that, of course, is a belief. Substance use disorders. 43% of active duty military binge drink in the past 30 days and 15% in the last 1 to 2 weeks. A lot of them use marijuana. It's the most common, especially, if you're a veteran, a lot of your colleagues, I know you don't, but a lot of your colleagues do. Cocaine, amphetamines, methamphetamines, methylphenidate, heroin, and other opiates. There's prescription and non-prescription opiates, including fentanyl. Now, there's one group of drugs that active duty military often get addicted to. They are the synthetic cannabinoids. Synthetic marijuana, 100 times more potent than marijuana. There's the synthetic cathinones. These are called bath salts. They're 10 times more potent than the most potent stimulants, like amphetamine. Then there are stimulant hallucinogen combinations. And why are these drugs the favorites of active duty military? Because drug tests do not detect those drugs. They don't detect it. So you can use these drugs, you can get addicted, you can get them over the internet. Readily available. You can get them in convenience stores, the bath salts, use the cathinones. Powerful stimulants. So watch out for these. Family and marital problems, 1 to 2. One out of every, one or two people out of every 10 people in the military, active duty, and likely veterans as well. And these are the risk factors. And this interferes with spiritual readiness. Inner conflict over spiritual issues. In other words, negative feelings over transgression of moral values. There are various terms used to refer to conflict, moral injury, spiritual injury, soul injury. I like to use moral injury. We need to be alert for their presence and where possibly address them preemptively. That's in terms of what chaplains should be doing, in the military, and those who are veteran chaplains. So a few more words about it. We have a scale that measures it, 10 items. The 10-item Miss Military version short form. Okay, it's been published in a famous, a big time journal here, Military Medicine. And it's been, psychometrically analyzed in active duty military and in veterans. And it's been shown to be a valid indicator. So if you're having guilt over something that happened, shame, if you feel betrayed by military leaders, you were put in a position where you had no choice but to betray your moral values, or you feel betrayed by the people back home who didn't appreciate you risking your life. If you have some moral concerns about what you did, you have difficulty trusting other people. If you have sense of loss of meaning and purpose in your life, if you have difficulty forgiving others, forgiving yourself, forgiving God, or receiving forgiveness for what happened, if you are self-condemning yourself, if you are having spiritual and religious struggles, or if your faith has gotten weak, it's not as strong as it used to be, your connection with God isn't as close, then you may have moral injury, and you do not need to stay there. There is absolutely no reason to get stuck in moral injury, because there are treatments for it. And do you know that religions, all of the major religions in the world, have for millennia developed ways to deal with this? Mainly because many of the religions emerged out of war, out of wartime conflict. Islam, Hinduism, believe it or not, Judaism. Just read the Jewish scripture. Read like kings. You know, it's just one story after the other of battling neighbors, killing, wiping out entire communities, men, women, children, dogs, cats, pets. Everything gets wiped out by the Jewish, warriors that are in there to conquest the, the promised land. So, they figured out ways of dealing with those natural emotions that emerge from doing stuff like that. So we've and others have developed ways to address those. So I'm wasting time here, so I got to move on. But, I'm really trying to get at some of this. So how common is this moral injury? Well, we did a multi-site study, active duty, well, actually veterans, 373 veterans, multi-site study. 90%, 9 out of 10 veterans indicated a 9 or 10 on a severity scale of 1 to 10 of at least one inner conflict symptom. And 60% reported 5 or more symptoms at this severity. So if you're a veteran, you're on this call. Let's say there are 60 veterans on this call. What's 90% of 60? It's about 50. It's certainly the majority. Likewise, in a study of active duty military, 80% had at least one symptom of inner conflict of 9 or 10 on a severity scale of 1 to 10. So like 10 is the maximum score of severity, 1 is the lowest score, and they're scoring 9 or 10. That is 80% are scoring 9 or 10 on at least one of these symptoms. And more than half had 4 or more of these symptoms. And all of this is published, so this is done well enough to get it published in a peer-reviewed academic journal. And some of these are good journals. Now, what are some non-religious and religious? Well, here are some. I'm going to start out with non-religious sources of spiritual readiness. Quite quickly here, motivation to sacrifice for the greater good. That's one source of spiritual readiness. Pursuit of meaning and purpose. That might also be a source of spiritual readiness. The desire to protect and serve country, family, and fellow warfighters. Another source of spiritual readiness. And Stoic philosophy also is a source for the person who is not religious. Stoic philosophy is used by many of the military leaders in the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard. And I may say just a word about that here. So Stoicism is an ancient Greek school of philosophy founded in Athens by Zeno of Citium around 300 BC. This philosophy was promoted by the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca and widely disseminated by the teachings of the Greek slave Epictetus in the 1st and 2nd centuries AD. Soon after Epictetus, the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote about Stoicism in his book Meditations. Marcus Aurelius is one of the Roman emperors who led the persecution of the Christians during the, where they sent them to lions in the Colosseum there. And this philosophy spread throughout the Roman Empire. Now, modern Stoic philosophers include Admiral James B. Stockdale, who was, was an admiral. He was a fighter pilot and ended up in, he was in Vietnam and ended up for several years in, North Vietnamese prison camp. And the 4-star Marine Corps General James N. Mattis. So these guys are really into Stoic philosophy. You want to know more about it? The Obstacle is the Way. This is a very interesting, easy to read book about Stoic philosophy, written by Ryan Holiday, who is a Stoic philosopher evangelist. He is an evangelist as strong for Stoic philosophy as Billy Graham was for Christianity. I can promise you that. But it's a very, very logical, rational, practical book that for non-religious people who aren't into that, it's a great book. Okay, what are some religious sources of spiritual readiness? Praise be to the Lord, my rock, who trains my hands for war, my fingers for battle. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers and against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. Therefore, put on the full armor of God, so that when the day of evil comes, you may be able to stand your ground. And after you have done everything, to stand. Why should you not fight in God's cause? Now, this is actually the Quran. So if you're Muslim, why should you not fight in God's cause and for those oppressed men, women, and children who cry out, Lord, rescue us from this town whose people are oppressors? By your grace, give us a protector and give us a helper. Those who have been attacked are permitted to take up arms because they have been wronged. God has the power to help them. God has the power to help them. Those who have been driven unjustly from their homes only for saying our Lord is God. That is in the Quran. And that is why there is very little PTSD among Muslims in the Middle East. Very little PTSD, because they know why they're fighting. They know. In the Bhagavad Gita, if you're Hindu or possibly Buddhist, I think we got some from the Buddhists too, but performing all works as an offering unto me, this is Lord Krishna, who's a reincarnation of the Supreme God in Hinduism, who, looks and sounds a whole lot like the God in Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. So he says, he says to Arjuna, he's advising someone who is fighting in war, he's his charioteer, why should you not fight in God's cause? For those oppressed men, women, and children who cry out, Lord, rescue us. Oh, sorry about that. Sorry. Performing all works as an offering unto me. That's fighting as an offering unto me. Constantly meditate on me as the supreme God. Become free from desire and selfishness, with your mental grief departed. Fight. That's what he told Arjuna, because Arjuna was having depression. He didn't know he was fighting his cousins. They're having a war between cousins there, in a long time ago. And Arjuna didn't want to fight. But Lord Krishna, the reincarnation of the Supreme God, says, offer it to me. Do it for me. Meditate on me and fight. Okay, and what did the Buddha have to say? Buddhism is really not all that of aggressive religion, but he said the Buddha did not teach his followers to surrender to any form of evil power, be it a human or supernatural being. This is what a very famous Theravada monk and scholar said. Okay. So here's our model of spiritual readiness. You've got your non-religious sources, like I said earlier, and you've got your religious sources, and those sources build up spiritual readiness. And spiritual readiness does what? It enhances happiness and life satisfaction. It increases meaning and purpose. It enhances virtue and character. It enables close social relationships. It prevents mental illness, mental health problems, and also preserves physical health. And it may even promote financial and material stability, believe it or not. Spiritual readiness influences all aspects of human flourishing. And human flourishing helps people to successfully reintegrate after the military service as a veteran, and also enhances warrior readiness if you're active duty military. let's look a little bit more at human flourishing. So human flourishing, I said earlier, this is from Tyler VanderWeel, who is a world-renowned biostatistician at the Harvard School of Public Health. He wrote this for the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, which is the journal of the national of the group, the National Academy of Sciences, that advises Congress on decisions with regard to health. And so this is in their journal. This is promoted by them and particularly by my colleague, Tyler VanderWeel. Okay, so those are the dimensions of spiritual readiness. These are the pathways that lead to human flourishing. Sorry about that. I said spiritual readiness, I meant human flourishing. So these are human flourishing dimensions, and these are pathways that lead to human flourishing. So pathways that lead to it are family, education, work and employment, and religious community involvement. So VanderWeel did not include as a core component of human flourishing because he wanted human flourishing to include everybody, but he did include it as one of the key pathways that leads to human flourishing. Okay, so what about, is that true? Really, do religious beliefs and practice really enhance your, basically your human flourishing? Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at that. Let's review some of that research very quickly. This is out of the Handbook of Religion and Health. This is, there's a 2013 version that's coming out here soon, September. It's massive. It's co-authored by I'm the lead author, but my co-author is Tyler VanderWeel at Harvard and John Petit in the School of Medicine at Harvard in psychiatry. So the three of us wrote this book, over 1,000 pages, documents the best research in the world on this topic, thousands of studies, provides public policy implications for it as well. Recommendations for leaders of governments of all countries, especially ours. Okay, here's the handbook that's coming out. It's $200. It's got everything in it. And for $200, it ought to have everything in it. It's taken literally 6 years to write this. 6 years. Okay, so here are the 6 core components of human flourishing. And how is religion related to these? Well, in our review in the second edition of the handbook, now this third edition is coming out, but there's a second edition published in 2012, nearly 80% of stories of studies, quantitative studies, shows that religious people are happier. They have higher life satisfaction. They just score higher on psychological well-being, 80%. These are significant findings. They're all of these studies are in the handbooks of religion and health, all 326. You can look them up. You can do the review. This was a systematic review. This is exactly what you will find in the academic literature: psychiatry, medicine, nursing, public health, social sciences. There it is. And 3 of those studies, only 3, less than 1%, found that religious people have lower levels of well-being. Hope and optimism. 73% of studies show that religious people are more hopeful. And more than 80% show that they're more optimistic about the future. Yeah, they don't have to worry about dying, although we all worry about it. You know, there's something that comes later. Something better. Hey, you got to be optimistic to think that way. Okay, and we did a study, our veterans, 509 veterans in U.S. active duty military, and as people got more religious, their hope increased in a vertical manner, in a significant, stepwise manner, as this slide shows. Okay, mental and physical health, depression. Okay, 61% of studies show religious people are less depressed and recover from depression more quickly. Here's a study of young people. This is average age 23. You think, well, this is only for old people. Nope. These are average age 23. This is out of the Harvard School of Public Health after controlling for more than 24 other predictors of depression. they found that there was a more than 30% risk for these young people to develop depression over a 6-year period. This is a prospective study predicting risk over the future 6 years. And those who are attending religious services more often have a more than 30% reduced risk. Suicide. This is a study over 20,000 randomly sampled Americans. Those who attended religious services twice a month or more were 94% less likely to die from suicide. 90% less likely. This is out of the Harvard School of Public Health in JAMA Psychiatry, the top psychiatry journal in the world. And it shows that people attending, these 90,000 women followed for over 14 years, looking at risk of dying from suicide. Those who are attending at least once a week are 7 times less likely to commit suicide compared to those who never attend religious services. This is also out of the Harvard School of Public Health. This is risk of dying from a death of despair. This is a death that is due to alcohol, drugs, or suicide. Okay? Alcohol, drugs, or suicide. And women who are attending religious services at least once a week, the 66,000 women, are about 70% less likely to die from a death of despair. Okay, what about men? I know I got one for men. There's the one for men. This is the one for women, 70%. This is the one for men, 50% less likely to die from a death of despair if they're going to church or mosque or synagogue or temple at least once a week. What about alcohol use and abuse? Over 80 to 90% of studies show that religious people are less likely to use and abuse alcohol. The same, this is one of over 3,000 veterans. This is a national random sample of veterans. Some of you might have been in this study. Now this is based on our Duke University Religion Index. This is based on 5 questions: religious attendance, prayer and Bible or scripture study, a close relationship with God based on 3 items assessing intrinsic religiosity, the extent to which the person's life is centered on their religious faith. Those scoring on the upper half of that scale were more than half as likely, were less than half as likely to have lifetime PTSD. They were 50% less likely to have lifetime major depression, a really bad depression. They were about 1/3 less likely to have a lifetime alcohol use disorder. They were 70% less likely to have current PTSD, and they were more than 70% less likely to have a current alcohol use disorder. Again, national random sample. This was a cross-sectional study. Illicit drug use, 84% of studies show, less use. And consequently, because those who are religious are mentally healthier and socially healthier, they have less heart disease, lower blood pressure, lower rates of stroke, less cognitive decline with aging, less physical disability, better immune functioning, less systemic inflammation, better endocrine function, lower levels of stress hormones, lower death rates from cancer, greater longevity. I wish that I could show you all that research, but I'm out of time. So, meaning and purpose in life, virtually all of the studies show that religious people have more of it. Virtue and character, higher among the more religious, thankfully. Lower rates of delinquency and crime, closer social relationships, better marital stability, and the key pathways are better. Family and marital stability, and 80 to 90% families are more stable among religious families. Here's out of Harvard showing a 50% up to 50% reduction in risk of divorce or separation in a sample of 66,000 initially married women. Better education, religious families, the kids get just complete school more likely and get better grades. They're more likely to get good jobs and be employed in the future. There religious community involvement, naturally, religious people who, and all of this contributes to spiritual readiness. Here's the model. Successfully train, deploy, and reintegrate after service. Right there. Who does this? Who delivers? Who's responsible for spiritual readiness? Number one is chaplains. They're the only ones, really, but they need support. They need support from government decision makers, military leaders, behavioral health services, medical providers, and the American people. And there are religious interventions for increasing spiritual readiness. One is religious CBT, and we've got versions for Christians, Jews, Muslims, Hindus, and Buddhists. Here's a 12-session pastoral care intervention for moral injury that focuses on these 10 symptoms of moral injury. Here are the modules used to treat it: conviction, lamentation, repentance, confession, forgiveness, reconciliation, and atonement.
Yeah.
We're talking about, that's the way religion deals with moral injury. So in conclusion, spiritual readiness impacts human flourishing, produces better mental, social, behavioral, and physical health, thereby increasing warrior readiness and spiritual readiness in general if you're a veteran. These findings have huge implications for military leaders, most of whom are unaware of this research and may underestimate the importance of what military chaplains do and what religious involvement actually produces in terms of warrior readiness and, in general, readiness for life's traumas that we all face, especially after the war. And clinical applications of this research are vast in terms of provision of mental and physical health care to our military service members and to our active duty service members and our veterans. So that's it. Further resources, here's the book, Spiritual Readiness. Get it, it's $7. Come on. Here's the one on moral injury. It's a little more expensive. It's $1 on Kindle. We're literally making nothing on these books. And I wish we had time, but it's out of time. And I have a 5-day workshop. And believe it or not, we have no electricity.
No, doctor.
5-day, 8-hour workshop. I got 45 people here from all over the world, from Nepal, from Malaysia, from Africa, from South Africa, from Nigeria, and people from all over the US have paid, and we got no electricity. It's 100 degrees outside.
Oh my
We
goodness.
had like a tornado that destroyed all the trees around. It came right through the place we're having the conference. So anyway, I gotta go. See you guys.
Okay, thank you, doctor. Again, thank you so much. There's a couple of questions. We'll get those to you.
Okay,
And,
sounds good.
This really reinforces the reason we have a faith network, everyone.
Okay.
It makes the case for spirituality for veterans and service personnel. So anyway, thank you, doctor.
Bye.
Okay. Again, sorry, we had Dr. Koenig is going right back to his, not sure how this is going to work for his workshop but he was kind enough to put us into the middle of his break for his retreat that he's doing at any rate. So at any rate, let's tell you what, I wanted to introduce our panels. One of the things I was going to mention too, you can put your questions into the chat, and we'll get to. There's only a couple of questions. Rick, you had a question. We'll make sure we get back to that. There was another comment that I thought was really interesting. Gary, I think you said the moral injury coming out of Afghanistan and that sort of thing is I'm seeing it, several veterans who were there, they're experiencing that. So I'm honored to introduce our chaplain panel. They're very experienced. What they're going to be doing is reflecting on the messages of Dr. Koenig based on their experience. Start out with Chaplain Chris Melvin. He holds an Associate of Applied Science degree from Community College of the Air Force, a Bachelor of Arts from International Baptist College and Seminary, Master of Divinity from Phoenix Seminary. He's a War College Military Fellow at Fletcher School for Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, and a Doctor of Ministry at Wesley. He holds a Doctor of Ministry at Wesley Theological Seminary. His fields of study and ministry focus primarily on just what we're talking about, the moral injury, moral character development, international security, and role of religion. He enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, serving from February of 1990 to July of 1994. He was an aircraft armament, graduated in May of 1998 with a Bachelor of Arts, Pastoral Studies, a Master of Biblical Arts, Master of Arts in Biblical Studies. In June 2002, he rejoined the military, enlisting in the Arizona Army National Guard, and is still a member, has been a chaplain since 2006. Chaplain Melvin has had 2 combat deployments, 2008 in Afghanistan, 2017, 2018 in the Horn of Africa. He currently serves as a senior state Army chaplain for the Army in Arizona Army National Guard. Chaplain Conrad Targonsky is a retired Navy captain and chaplain. He's a Roman Catholic priest of the Franciscan Order, has been the chaplain at Viterbo University in La Crosse, Wisconsin since 2011. Born in Chicago, Chaplain Targonsky is commissioned in the United States Navy Chaplain Corps in October 1987. He served in Okinawa, Korea, United Arab Emirates, and deployed with the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson with Operation Southern Watch, 1994-95. From February 24, 2004 to March 2005, Chaplain Targonsky served as a regimental combat chaplain with the 7th Marine Regiment for both the battles of Fallujah and Anbar Province. Chaplain Targonsky retired from the United States Navy in September 2010, where he had served as Assistant Chief of Staff for Religious Ministries at the United States Marine Corps Air Ground Combat Center in 29 Palms, California. Chaplain Targonsky leads veteran healing pilgrimages each year to Assisi, Italy, the home of St. Francis, who was a warrior. Chaplain Karen Jones, she holds a Bachelor's of Arts from Oklahoma Baptist University, a Master of Arts from Western Baptist Theological Seminary, and a Master of Arts from Oklahoma City University. 2019, she received a Master of Strategic Studies, U.S. Army War College, Carlisle Barracks in Pennsylvania. Chaplain Jones began full-time vocational Christian ministry in 1989, serving at Southern Baptist churches in Oklahoma and Hawaii. She is ordained and endorsed for chaplain ministry by the Baptist General Convention of Texas. In 1996, Chaplain Jones enlisted in the U.S. Army as a chaplain assistant, serving at Fort Stewart, Georgia, Menwith Hill Station, Harrogate, England. 1999, she received a direct commission to serve as an Army chaplain. She has served as a battalion level chaplain at Fort Bliss, Sofield Barracks, and Fort Huachuca. 2008, she became the deputy garrison chaplain at Fort Sill, Oklahoma. Following advanced civilian schooling, where she earned a Master of Arts in International Relations and World Relations. She served as an instructor and writer, command and general college staff at Fort Leavenworth. She also was selected as a brigade chaplain for the 516th Army Brigade. There's a whole bunch of other stuff that she's gotten into. I hope I have to apologize for chaplain. What I will say is she assumed in 2021, she assumed responsibilities as the 3 Army Corps for Fort Hood Command Chaplain. She received numerous medals and awards. There are probably 30 of them that she created. It includes the Bronze Star, Legion of Merit, Meritorious Service Medal with 6 oak clusters. In February 23, Chaplain Jones retired from active duty with 26 years of service. She did not quit serving. She currently serves as a chaplain to the Gila County Sheriff's Office and several Gila County regional fire districts. Chaplain Joel Larson. Chaplain Joel Larson holds a Master's of Divinity from Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary, Master of Arts in Human Services Counseling from Liberty University. He's currently serving as a staff chaplain at the VA Medical Center in Phoenix. Previously, Joel served as the Director of Chaplain Services for Aurora Behavioral Health for 9 years. He retired from the Arizona National Guard in 2014 as a Joint Forces as the Joint Forces Headquarters Chaplain Assistant, where he served as a mobile crisis counselor and senior chaplain assistant. He taught suicide prevention and combat and Operation Stress First Aid. He also previously worked as a mobile crisis therapist and a volunteer as pastor of a local church. He volunteers now as chaplain for the Girl Scouts and for the American Legion Post 145. Before we hear our panel, I'll let you know again that you can put questions in the chat. We're monitoring them. Those that we can't answer, we'll get back to you with those. So with that, I'd like to I've been talking a lot about them. You can see how impressive they are. What I'd like to do is start, I'll ask one of the chaplains just to reflect on which messages given by Dr. Koenig aligned with your experience. Maybe we'll start with Chaplain Chris on that one.
Yeah, where it's aligned, I'd probably say just the awareness of the need for spiritual readiness. The Chaplain Corps has been wrestling with this for a little bit. I've got some notes scattered around. All those things are true. Obviously, the data shows it. I do have a question when we get to the second question, some of the barriers that are related to that, but I'd like to hear what the other panelists, how they've seen this align.
Okay, great. Chaplain Jones, maybe you could reflect from your experience.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of this. I think this is a powerful event to expose a lot of us to the challenges that are out there, the things that people are dealing with. I think the data that Dr. Koenig presented on moral injury was spot on, especially when we think of those who are coming up on the anniversary of the withdrawal from Afghanistan. I think the data that he presented personally connected for me, because I know Dr. Koenig has done some work with Dr. Lisa Miller and her work on spiritual readiness, especially with the United States Army. I appreciate the fact that he validates the role of religion in preparing a warrior to do the job that they're being asked to do. You know, when you think about it, we market the military service in a particular way of highlighting a job opportunity or a college money opportunity or whatever. But if you boil it down, at the end of the day, we're asking young men and women to be prepared to kill. We're asking them to be prepared to die in service to their nation. And those are difficult things to wrap your heart and mind around. And so I think he's spot on, and his collaboration with Dr. Miller, her twin study, we do know that there is, you know, legitimate evidence that participation in a religious or spiritual practice does improve health and resilience for our combat warriors and our veterans, of course. So I really appreciated his research and continue to use his work and Dr. Miller's work. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chaplain Jones. Brad Targonsky, what, based on your experience, you know, what seemed to line up with what you've experienced, and what may be a little different from what you've experienced?
Everything. Thank you. Greetings from La Crosse, Wisconsin, the Green Bay Packers. I I was excited to hear Dr. Koenig. The role of the chaplain, we always taught, was that the chaplain has to provide for their own, has to facilitate for others, has to care for all. And the care for all basically are the no religious preference and people who are not religious, but also we're advisor to the command, and the commanding officer, we keep getting drilled, is the leader of the religious program in the military. So I think when Dr. Koenig kind of gave I call it a holistic presentation, yes, it's everything. And my background basically as a Navy Marine Corps chaplain comes to the fact that I am also a Franciscan, a follower of Francis of Assisi. And what I'm trying to do is kind of struggle with the ambiance of the world. Some people call it relativism, that the major opinion carries. But I think those who have a religious background find themselves adhering to a person, and that person gives them a direction to take their lives. So the chaplain has to be really a thermometer and a kind of a guide. So what Doctor was saying, I was almost dancing listening to him, because it is holistic. And I think it has to be also part of the chaplain to lead. And I think, I'll fast forward this real quick, but when I did retire, I had to put this all in perspective, especially with my battle experience. And I think for me, it's pilgrimage. And it's walking, it's thinking and putting things together with the people of the world. And that's why we do this together. So that was the message I'm bringing. I think it's a very holistic way, and he has my support. Thank you.
Thank you, Father. Chaplain Joel, what are your comments?
Excuse me. First, I want to say thanks to Chaplain Jones. We often forget that in the military, we train service members to kill. That's our primary job. I thought it was interesting. Dr. Koenig said this, and it caught me a lot. Says there's not a lot of PTSD in the Middle East and Muslim populations because they know what they're fighting for. I just finished reading Achilles in Vietnam by Jonathan Shea, which is kind of that foundational book that really started the discussion of moral injury. And one of the things that he said was the Greek gods were fickle. They kind of toy with humans a bit. And then he goes to equate the Greek gods with military commanders and politicians. And what I noticed is that a lot of times our service members are being asked to kill, and they really don't know what they're being asked to kill for. And that becomes fickle in their heads, and they're I served a year in Iraq up in 2005, and we took care of some historical religious buildings. And when the U.S. pulled out, ISIS went through and destroyed those buildings. And I sat back and I looked at the news article and I went, what did we do it for? What was the point? And I think that is a huge thing that I think is a part of that spiritual readiness. We need to be able to answer that question. Why are we really doing this?
No, excellent point, Chaplain Joel. Okay, let's stay with that first question and see if anybody had any other comments or comments on the comments of the other chaplains regarding Dr. Koenig's presentation. Then we'll get into the second question. Jump in, who'd ever like to. Okay, hearing none. Let's go to the second question. This is a question specifically requested by Father Koenig, and I'd like maybe if you could help me out here, Heidi, if you could kind of record some or take notes on the answers that come up as to what these. So, what are the various experiences you have experienced in bringing spiritual readiness to the service members and or veterans that you have served or are now serving. So why don't we open it up? Why don't we go back? Why don't we go back to Chaplain Chris Melvin, and we'll just go through the cycle again.
Yeah.
Chaplain Chris.
Yeah, this is one I've been working through probably the last year. I took a class during War College from Dr. Vanderbilt, and he asked the question at the end of the session about instrumentalizing our faith, and that's an internal discussion to the chaplain corps, to religious practitioners. It's an internal barrier, I think. Dr. Vanderbilt's working out of the Chan School of Public Health there at Harvard, and tremendous data and research, and Dr. Koenig briefed it here or shared it here. It's orders of magnitude, the difference it makes to have a religious framework or spiritual framework on public health concerns or things that affect public health in the individual and society at large. But when we start applying that, so it's better for families, it's better for me getting good outcomes. The question that I find internally, the internal wrestling match is, well, are we instrumentalizing the faith? Are we using, I'll put it crassly, are we using God for our ends? Are we using whatever the religious framework is so I can have a better life, as opposed to that's a natural outcome? And maybe that's too simplistic, but it oftentimes in my discussions with other chaplains and other spiritual practitioners, that concept comes up. These are measures of effectiveness, all this data and research, but how do I get past, or how do I work around the bigger concern of instrumentalization? And it seems to stop the conversation and stop. That's just a stuck point for me. Does my question make sense, or my comment make sense?
Yeah, you know, what I was thinking about, I hadn't never thought of that, and I don't think a lot of people have. You know, is this a checklist for spiritual, to make people happier, to make better warriors? In other words, here, check this box, you go to religious services and now you're going to be better, you know, and the religious structure becomes the underpinning. Whereas, you know, that personal spiritual connection, you know, may fall into the background to some extent. So hope I paraphrased you a little bit there.
It's that, but it's also, how are we approaching religion broadly? It is not a, it's not a, was it Huey Lewis in the News? It's not a new drug, one that won't make you sick, feel 3 feet thick.
Yeah.
It's part of personal spirituality. I don't know how to get away from the instrumentalization of it. And I'd be curious what the other three panelists have to say, or anybody else on the call.
Okay, well, great. Why don't we do this? Why don't we go to Chaplain Karen? You can comment on that question, but also any barriers that you see and you're working with veterans and service personnel. So Chaplain Karen.
Hey, thank you. Hey, Chris, I was pondering in my head, is spiritual readiness a risk management strategy? I think that's what I hear you saying. And we can talk about that offline. But as I was listening to Dr. Koenig, what was popping into my mind was some of the things that I've talked with our younger chaplains, developing chaplains about, and that's perhaps some faulty assumptions that we may make as clergy. And I tell them the story of a brigade commander I met who said to me, "Chaplain, why should I trust you?" And he said, "You know, you chaplains, you come in with your cross or your crescent or your tablets or whatever it is, and you just assume that commanders and soldiers will automatically trust you because you're a clergy person. But why should I trust you?" And that kind of drilled into my heart, my soul, and my mind for the rest of my career, is that I should never make the assumption that just because I wear the stole that I am automatically given trust. And I think that's a thing that we have to always keep in mind when we're dealing with soldiers or service members or veterans. The other thing is language. I think we make the assumption that because we are a nation that offers freedom of religion or freedom from religion, and that we have churches and synagogues and mosques and temples all over the nation, we assume that people speak the same language we do. And that when we refer to, there was a term on Dr. Koenig's slide, atonement, we assume that people know what that means. Well, if I asked 90 soldiers what that means, very few of them would have any concept of what atonement means or what reconciliation means, or, so, language is a key aspect of communicating with folks. And just because I went to seminary and I learned the Bible and I learned a certain language in Greek and Hebrew and whatever, it doesn't mean they understand what I'm talking about. And I need to be able to communicate to them in words that they can hear and appreciate and connect with. I think we make the assumption that service members and veterans know how to engage with spiritual communities, religious communities. When I was talking with service members, they had some awareness of religion in society, like they may be aware that there's a church on the corner, or they may be aware of the Bible or the Quran or whatever, that these things exist. And some of them had an awareness of rites of passage or things like that, but they were uncertain as to how to approach their own personal spiritual journey. How do I get at it? And, I know when I've retired and moved and we're trying to find a church home, and I've been in church since, I was cutting my teeth on a crib in church. So I've been in churches, but even my own journey to find a new church home in retirement, it's awkward. It's weird. There's a level of discomfort to it. And so I think the assumption that people are going to look in the phone book or look on the internet and they're just going to come into our doors, I think that's a faulty assumption. I think the approach of religious communities or spiritual communities trying to look at those aspects of human flourishing and saying, okay, how can we enable human flourishing in our community? Maybe it's an affinity group. Maybe it's, gathering a bunch of service members and some retirees and putting them together and talking about motorcycle maintenance, or maybe it's golf or hunting, or I don't know, maybe it's pickleball, whatever, but have some kind of human connection with them to build relationships, to establish trust, to learn their language, to find out where they are mentally, emotionally, spiritually, physically. How are they doing? Just always keep it in the forefront of your mind. And this is what I said to all my chaplains all the time. It's not about me. It's about them. It's their spiritual journey. If I can just build relationship, establish trust, and hear their story, then I have the opportunity to connect them to a faith community.
Yep.
Makes sense? So, thanks.
Yeah, thank you so much. Chaplain Karen and I had kind of a side discussion about this, and what I was impressed with is many of the chaplains, are Christians, but not everybody is a Christian or even has a faith. And she basically said our journey is to work with each of them on their journey. So thank you for that insight for me. We got a few minutes left here. Let's see, we're getting pretty close to the end. Let's maybe I could hear from Father Conrad for 1 minute, and then maybe Joel for a minute before we start closing down.
Yeah,
So
basically,
Chaplain Conrad.
I would say it's deck plate ministry. And I told the chaplains the same thing that Chaplain Jones would say, when the Marines go someplace, you go with them, you don't stay behind. And you particularly have an interest with the NRPs, the Northern Religious Preference people. But when it says here about barriers, I think it's not really a barrier, it's more of a challenge. Maybe I got too Marine eyes, it's overcome and adapt. But I think that my experience of bringing spiritual readiness was being with the Marines and being present in that very close context. So right on.
Yeah, thank you, Chaplain. Okay, I guess we'll finish with Chaplain Joel. I wish we could spend 3 hours with all this stuff, but then we'd lose our audience. So I really appreciate you folks being forgiving me for the brevity. So Chaplain Joel, comments, barriers?
So I'm going to try and say 3 things really, really fast. One is to Chris. I struggle with using God as a tool. I did ministry for 9 years in mental health, and often that is what it felt like, is that he's just another tool in the toolbox. And I think that there's more to that. The second thing, and this is just a question for everybody to think about, because I don't have an answer on this. But one of my thoughts is, do we have more moral injury because we've removed religion and God from our lives and our public spaces? And then number 3, I agree with Chaplain Jones and Father Conrad. We really, really need to listen, and not just listen, but really hear what's going on underneath. And when we do that, we find there's a lot more moral injury than we really think there is. And then just really quick, for somebody asked the question, and I'm trying to get to it. Jason, the book name is Achilles in Vietnam, and it's written by Jonathan Shea. So there you go.
Okay, thank you, Chaplain Joel. Appreciate that. And I know there's a question by my friend Linda about what about the 1/3, there are nuns. We're gonna send that over to Dr. Koenig, but in his book, he actually has specific ways that chaplains should deal with people with no religion. It moves more to meaning and purpose. So with that, though, I want to first of all, thank everybody for joining us. This is recorded, so you can look at it again if you missed some points. I want to thank our panelists, and also I want to thank our team. That's Heidi Lindsay, Dee Person, Cesar Torres, Amanda Yanez. It's a wonderful A team that I work with, and then Thomas Winkle for the support that we get. I'm going to turn it over to Heidi now for closing. Heidi.
Thank you, Mike, and thank you all for coming. I want to throw out there real quick that there was a question of, do we have more moral injury because we have removed religion and God from public spaces? In Dr. Koenig's book, Spiritual Readiness, he does touch on that. So if you do read that, you'll learn a little bit more about that in there. Okay, our upcoming events we have at ACMF. October 19th, Mental Health Summit. November 15th is our next faith gathering like this one. It will be on Zoom, and we will send out more information on that. And then April 17th and 18th is our 14th annual statewide symposium. And we will have a faith and spirituality track there as well that Mike Wald always heads up, and we can learn a lot more together, and excitingly in person. So we would love you to come to that. We will have more information coming out on that later this year. And in closing, I would like to ask you to please fill out our survey, and we will be sending a link of this video and all supplies with that, as far as the books for reference and the slide presentation and everything you'll need to review or to watch again. And anybody who would like to be added to the newsletter, I have one person who asked to be added. Go ahead and either drop it in the chat or email me at heidi@arizonacoalition.org, and you will also get more information on our upcoming events. Thank you all for coming. We really appreciate your time, and we hope to see you again at the next one. Have a great day.